Hello. Throughout history, there have been many attempts at successful kidnapping. Many of them have been quite famous, some of them not so much. What really makes a great kidnapping story is kidnapping somebody of uh, note. So, somebody who the public will definitely notice and be very angry about. And of those, not many were successful. If you take one of our recent books into accounting, the story of Truly Devious went terribly awry. What does it take to make a successful kidnapping? Well, apparently it takes a 12-year-old.
And with that, welcome to this week's episode of the 800's. I am one of your hosts, Alex, and you just heard from my fellow co-host, Adam. And let's give a quick shout out to our behind-the-scenes man, Alan. Hey, yo, and thanks for everything. And with that, let's do some plugs, man.
Yeah, so if you joined us during our pre-show while I was eating my lovely dinner, you may have heard the sweet melodic tunes of Incompetech. That was Fearless First by Incompetech. We absolutely love Incompetech. They do a lot of great things. You should check them out at incompetech.filmmusic.io. They are cool. Also, we have a YouTube channel. Link is down below the video. So check that out. You can find other book discussions. Sorry, couldn't think of the word. You can find other book discussions on our YouTube channel as well as our podcast and some other cool chats. So check it out. Also, we want you to be a Patreon and tell us what to do. If you join any of our tiers, you get to pick what book we read next. We have a current vote out there that ends tonight at 9:15. So check out Patreon. You can just click the link below the video and it'll take you right to our page. And go ahead and vote. And if you like what you see, maybe join us and give us a buck or two so we can continue doing cool things like reviewing books.
And a quick shout out to our newest patron, Storm. Hope they're in the chat. Thank you very much. We love that we have apparently put out content that has drawn some people in, and we hope to continue doing that. So thank you. And this week on the 800's, we'll be discussing the first book in the eponymous series, Artemis Fowl by Eoin Colfer. I only just learned how to say that name right. The titular Artemis is a criminal mastermind, the likes of which the world has never seen. Not only is this because of his prodigious intellect, nor even the fact that he is a mere 12 years of age. It is because he is the first human or mud person, depending on your perspective, ever to find and truly challenge those who had faded into legend millennia ago, the fairy folk, aka the people.
Very well done, Alex.
Thank you.
With that, I'll just give you guys a quick brief overview of how the 800's works. If you joined us before, you know the spiel, but if this is your first time, essentially Alex and I will post or pitch topics or questions that we want to talk about. We'll talk about it between each other for a few minutes while we give you guys in the chat a moment to fill in what you think about the conversation or topic or question. If you guys have anything that you want to talk about, go ahead and put it in the chat at any time. We love talking about things that we don't come up with ourselves. It really keeps the interaction live and feels more natural when it's not just Alex and I pitching ideas. So yeah, anytime you want, if you got something you want to talk about, go ahead and throw it in the chat and we'll give it a shout out and give it a discuss.
And also, if this is your first time joining us, welcome. And this is for you, for those who already know. Here on DM's Table and the 800's, we are trying to create a nice and supportive community, although it is not necessarily kid-friendly, despite this being geared towards children's book this week. So we'll try not to lean too heavily on swearing or anything like that, but it happens. So keep your kids with you with that grain of salt in mind, if you wish. And just in general, we want to build a supportive and fun community. So, just be nice or buck off.
Oh yeah, and as LPAC Phantom said, there definitely wasn't a movie made for this book. So um, just like there wasn't an Episode One movie for Star Wars, it's just there's no Last Airbender movie. There's no Artemis Fowl movie. So we're just talking about the book.
Or Aragon, that's the other one.
Yeah. Anyway, with that, let's get right into the topics of tonight. First question is always, what were your first impressions of the book?
Well, my first impressions were made when I was about Artemis's age, give or take a couple of years. Yeah, this is definitely a nostalgia book for me, and you can tell very much that it is geared towards a younger audience, like not little kids, but kids who are starting to really get into reading novels, like just that first tier novels, and it's done so well for that age group. And I had a blast rereading this. It was a nostalgia wash for sure for me, and it's really fun. It's the type of book that I love to share with like people who I think are like younger people in my life who I think might enjoy reading. And I was definitely getting that feel the whole way through. And it's if you take it for what it is, I thought it was a really fun book to read.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I too read this when I was a young lad, but my memory being what it is, it felt like the very first time. So, one thing I love about the Artemis Fowl books, sorry, I totally blanked on his name for a second. The one thing I love about the Artemis Fowl books is it definitely reads like a children's book, a very young, fresh reader book, but it's still very entertaining as an adult. It doesn't feel like it's being dumbed down, so to say, to a younger generation. It just feels like it doesn't go into those hard topics that younger people are not prepared for. So I really liked the book. It sucked me in, just like it probably did when I was very young, if I could remember that, but I can't.
Because we're old now. So we're wondering if anybody else out there had the same feeling, especially because we understand that our current target audience is in that adult range for the most part. How did you feel about reading this or rereading it if you had read it before? Apparently, V.S. Drake was read it like a virgin, read for the very first time. Excuse my horrible singing, but had to do it. Definitely not a Weird Al or whoever sang the original.
Yes. Well,
shows you my musical taste that I only know Weird Al.
We'll just blame it on the cheap USB microphone. It would sound better with a better mic and a sound booth, yeah. Yeah.
I agree with V.S. Drake. This isn't a YA novel. This is meant for younger kids. There's a pretty big it's hard to put your finger on it, but there is a distinction between the two. YA novels tend to lean a bit like there's always that romance element to it. There's that angst to it. And this doesn't really have that at all. It's just a book it's taken a lot of really classic fantasy elements and made them digestible for a young audience. And I think it was really well done to be able to do that and still keep it entertaining for people of all ages.
Yeah. I would agree with that. There's definitely some times where I was like, this isn't so deep that I wish there was depth there, but that didn't necessarily make it a less good book. It just didn't go as deep as some of the other books that we read.
Yeah. LPAC Phantom, yeah, that's a good way to say it. It's a middle grade the usual. Apparently, that's the usual term for younger than YA books, but not children's books. So, yeah, so middle school books apparently. um, Let's see here, a few more things from chats. I do like what Kate Rock said about it taking an ancient theme and putting it in the modern world. That is, I think, one of the things that's really fun about it is it's bringing fairy tales and legends to life in a way that seems, like considering it's magic, fairly realistic, especially in a relatively modern world. What did you think about that kind of marrying the past and present?
I thought it was pretty cool. It definitely gives that a more fairy tale type feel to it. I mean, obviously there was fairies and magic and stuff, but it was kind of cool to have a kind of a glimpse at like two different worlds stuck in two different times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of a neat aspect of the book.
Oh, and Stormy has a good point. It could be set in most time frames. Colfer did a good job of making it, relatively universal, considering he just said things that were advanced enough to tell that you weren't in ancient times, but that could be applied to just about any age, like digital screen, memory card, things like that, rather than like this specific technology, which I think was pretty smart on his part. And I think it can allow it to feel there's nothing in it that would necessarily take you out of the story because you're no longer in that era, and I think that's one of the things that kind of makes it fairly immersive even as an adult, is you just don't have to think about those things and you can just get into the story.
It will live to be cool until we have technology that rivals fairy magic stuff.
Well, and then we'll just empathize with the fairies, not the humans.
Okay, yeah, okay.
If you could even do that, because our chat is noting, there's a very much an anti-hero vibe to Butler and Artemis Fowl. What were your thoughts on having the main character be this? Starts off kind of like a villain-ish, but turns out to really kind of have that anti-hero sentiment to him.
So, what would you say the difference between anti-hero and villain is? Just
I
from
think
my own knowledge here.
I think it's a matter of intent, for the most part, and some execution. Like if there's an intent to do harm or an intent to subjugate, and it seems like in a lot of cases there was a slight avoidance of that, or there was a noted avoidance of that, like avoid killing them using tranquilizer darts. Now, granted, part of this was a strategy thing for Artemis, but that wasn't everything, or at least that's not the way that I seem to interpret it from Colfer's perspective as the author.
Yeah, I mean, to that, I would almost say he's not. I would say he's a villain. He kidnapped somebody. He just didn't murder people to do it. He has a line that he doesn't want to cross, but he still took somebody against their will and held them captive.
This is true, but based on his plan, he had every intent of, bringing them back alive, and he didn't have to do that at all. But, again, you are right that is he did something that was evil, and he plays the villain, but there's parts that are meant to pull you in and kind of make you empathize with him nonetheless. And maybe that's what made me lean anti-hero, is just the way that it was written to try or to give the semblance that he has some side of some non psychopathic antisocial side to him. Because it's hard to imagine a 12-year-old being a psychopath or a sociopath without with that kind of restraint anyway.
I would say like one thing Eoin Colfer did really well with the Artemis Fowl series is take that transition for Artemis. He started out as somebody who didn't give two craps about other people. He had a moral line that he wouldn't cross. He wasn't willing to murder people, but he would do anything up to murdering people to get money. Obviously, because kidnapping is pretty close to that line. I mean, there's some other adulter topics that are closer to the line, but obviously we're not going to see that in a middle school book.
I think it was just a middle book. But I think Alpac Venom makes a good point, and seeing it written out that way, that an anti-hero is someone who does good things in a bad way, like Deadpool. I agree. So yeah, maybe the term anti-villain is a bit more appropriate. Like he's doing something bad in a not as bad as it could be way. Like villain with a slight conscience.
Yeah.
But his motive is still completely self-serving as far as getting the money for his name and his household, and it doesn't even necessarily apply to anybody other than him and his own reputation and his obsession with that. It's hard to tell, especially because I've read the original and the book and the thing that doesn't exist tie-in. And the biggest thing that they change in the end is they remind you that like all of Artemis's moves are selfish. Like it's meant to take the empathy away at the end after building it up through the whole thing. Whereas I don't remember that happening in the original. I could be wrong, and please correct me, chat, if that is incorrect. But I think there had to be some of that so that you didn't completely disengage with Artemis as a character, because it's hard for us as human beings to engage with somebody that we can't empathize with on some level.
Yeah.
Although if you
true.
couldn't empathize with him, maybe you could empathize with arguably the other main character, Holly.
Holly is without a doubt a hero.
Oh, absolutely. In every sense of the word, as well, and like in the D&D alignment terms, definitely a chaotic good hero, or at the very least neutral good, because she's willing to break the rules to do the right thing to an extent.
So where does Artemis fall on the D&D scale?
Oh, that'd be an interesting. Let's see here. I would say chaotic neutral, probably. Because he's just in it for himself. He'll follow the rules if it suits him. Like he follows the rules in the fairy book to the point that it suits him. And he does it, so he'd be somewhere in that chaotic neutral to evil range. It's like technically he does a good thing at the very end where he heals his mom.
Yeah.
But it suits him, like his own purpose, so
I don't think of him as chaotic, though. Everything he does has like a specific means to an end sort of deal. I kind of agree with Via Strig. I'm leaning more towards lawful evil. He does things for himself, but has a specific code that he holds to, like no murder, for instance.
Maybe that has more to do with my need to better understand the alignment chart than it does my understanding of the characters, because I'm relatively new to that. But I think that's interesting. What do you think about Adam? What do you think about Storm Reed's comment that Holly is mean? She's willing to do anything to protect the gold until she gets to know Artemis. What do you think about that?
That's a hard one. Obviously Holly. Oh, I'm not plugged in. I'm going to answer this, and I'm going to have to dip off screen for a quick second. But Holly obviously is a victim at the beginning. She gets kidnapped. So I think that circumstance makes it hard to hold any action she takes as like she should be held accountable for it, because in the end, really, she's just trying to get away.
Mm-hmm.
The gold thing is obviously like I view that as like she's being a good cop. She's recovering the ransom, but I don't know. I think her actions are justified throughout the book. I don't think she does anything that would be out of character as a hero.
And I would tend to agree, because the other bit of context that like maybe is hard for us to empathize with as human beings and not fairy folk, is that these beings have lived for hundreds of years with this very strict set of rules that gives them something that is their lifeblood effectively, and that's magic. And if you don't abide by these rules, you don't have their magic. And that's not an easy thing to break, even in the worst of circumstances. And I wonder if the chat has anything to say about this, because let us know what you think about Holly's role and Stormreed's comment. But I would so far tend to agree that she plays the hero role, especially within the rules with which she grew up, and she's one of the very few people in this society willing to even remotely mess with this. And it has realistically fairly disastrous results for her when she does. So being reticent to let go of that, I don't think necessarily makes her mean. I think it just makes her a creature of the society she grew up in. And with that context, yeah, it's maybe not the nicest thing to do, but at least she has the empathy to even attempt to bridge the gap with Artemis, whereas nobody else in that society would even try. And I think that is what really makes her a true hero in the literary sense, anyway.
Yeah, that's the interaction between the fairy folk and the mud people are just like, I don't know, obviously they conflicted in the long past, and the mud people, being humans, don't remember it anymore, but the fairy folk do. So that and remember it in the, they have it written down in a book somewhere, way of remembering it, but that does kind of, I don't know, grant it that edge of distaste from the fairy folk towards mud people. And
yeah,
I do like that Holly and probably other LEP officers don't have as much of that distaste, because they exist on the surface somewhat and see that they're just people. So it's kind of a cool aspect to look at.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, and that's something to, like, at large, I think that some people don't talk enough about, is like the kind of prejudice that gets bred in distance between yourself and other people. It's like, even if you can observe them at all times, like the fairy folk can, like there's nuances that you miss when you don't engage with people. And yeah, there are, you're dealing with people who have a thousands-year-old history with each other, which is tough. But I think it takes that fortitude to look past that and see that there might be another way. And it takes a hero to be able to do that. And I think that is an underrated quality coming from our hero, Holly.
Yeah, definitely. And it looks like we have solved the debate thanks to K-Brock and LPAC. The anti-hero sounds very much like Artemis is an anti-hero, especially by the definition K-Brock posted. An anti-hero is the story's hero a character we root for, yet he typically possesses unpleasant or evil qualities. That definitely sounds like Artemis.
It may depend on your perspective, because the Google search on anti-villain is the story's villain, the character we wish to see vanquished, yet typically their personality, methods, or goals are in some way easy to empathize with. So it may depend on your perspective. Who do you empathize with more, the people or or Artemis Fowl? And that actually, I think, is part of what makes Artemis such an intriguing character. Like, yeah, it's easy to say, oh, it's pretty cool that there's like a 12-year-old that, you know, has the mind of an absolute genius and a truly badass butler who may be the origin of the very word that we, at least as we use it in English.
Badass or butler?
Probably both. I imagine if you look up badass in the dictionary, you just see Butler's visage. Well, that's an interesting take. V.S. Drake says that they thought Artemis Fowl was too smart. So what did you think about the portrayal of Artemis Fowl's intellect?
That is an excellent question, and kind of one I wanted to talk about next anyway. So cool.
Way to go, V.S. Drake.
You know,
someone's psychic.
Yeah, so for me, his backstory really lends that he's a genius. Like he's done with school and stuff, and he's only 12, and yeah, he's obviously a criminal mastermind because he has had successful criminal plots in the past. But to me, like everything that happens in the story doesn't scream genius to me. It just screams like somebody with maybe an average to a high intellect who is good under pressure. So I think the story of Artemis is more granting towards his genius title than the character of Artemis.
I thought there were elements in this, like being that I have a psychology background and knowing like what the actual requirements for genius are, as at least as we define them today. There are elements that he does that would qualify him absolutely as a genius. His memory retention, his ability to manipulate languages at 12 years old is well far and above his age. Like, so he is a genius. I don't know that he is quite, and he might be a master tactician for his age, but I think the story made his age show in the flaw in his plan. Like, he's not used to losing. There's an arrogance that comes with that, and there's a naivety that informs that arrogance that comes from his age. However, I don't think he was played as too smart. I do think that they might have tried to hammer in his intelligence a little much. That was probably one of the things that I didn't like in this book, is like they talked a lot about how smart he was, maybe a little more than I cared for, honestly. For a 12-year-old, though, I think he absolutely has genius intellect. He maybe has, he definitely has stuff to learn. His ability to deal with patterns and mechanics, like being able to figure out exactly how to put things together, would be genius level. Now, is he the smartest person ever to have lived? Not necessarily. He just chooses to apply his intellect in a very specific way that definitely highlights how smart he is. But again, I think the book kind of went out of its way, maybe a little much, in doing that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Alpac said with the show don't tell. It felt like a lot of it was just saying like Artemis did this, so he's a genius. But that's kind of what I said earlier, so I'll leave it at that.
No, I definitely agree. That's a good way to put it, Alpac. So on that note, why don't we talk about the heist / kidnapping itself? What parts of Artemis's plan did you find the most intriguing? Or what might have you done differently?
I really liked that he thought about like not letting Holly get more magic. by keeping her in a metal enclosure so that she had no access to wood, or sorry, to dirt. I like that he was very upfront with who he was from the get-go. He was like, "I'm Artemis Fowl, come and get me." And I thought it was pretty cool that the entire time he relied on the fact that he could escape something that absolutely nobody thought he could escape from. That I will say, like, that was not a point in favor of his intelligence. It wasn't a point in favor that he figured it out, but to hinge his entire plan on the bet that he was right, like like that was a huge gamble, and that part kind of swayed me, but it was cool.
Well, and I think one of the elements that Artemis kind of flies under the radar, and I think this is the true mark of intelligence and not just pure gambling, is he had a line in the sand and he was willing to walk away. Supposedly, he didn't have to, so we don't know, but he was willing to walk away if that line was met. And that's if it didn't work on his mom, hands up, I'm coming out. Here's everything back. He was, and if you're not willing to walk away, that's how you wind up with people who aren't smart about gambling. If you're not willing to walk away at the right time, then, you're probably not as smart as you think you are. But I do get that there were a lot of elements in this that were a gamble, but I think that's actually leads into one of my favorite aspects. And again, I think my favorite aspect is the fact that he went after the impossible. He went after something that nobody else would, because it's just fairy tales. It's just stories. But we know that a lot of the best stories in the world have elements of truth to them, and he was willing to look a little deeper into that. And it took, I think, specifically the openness of the mind of a child to be able to do that. And I think that is something that Eoin Colfer did a good job of outlining with showing, not necessarily telling, although he did a little bit. But I really like that it was something that felt like only a 12-year-old genius could do. Like I couldn't see like an adult doing the same thing, at least not in the same way. Sorry, laughing at VS Drake's knowing to hold them. Are you trying to get me to sing again?
I think that is just fine. I'll wait.
Wait, you're waiting for me to sing?
Yeah.
You gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. I don't know the rest of the lyrics, but I'm pretty sure this is the melody.
You nailed it. That was verbatim. That's amazing. Now, so Artemis figures out with his mom that your state of wakefulness remains the same in the time bubble.
Mm-hmm.
How does he know the sleeping drugs are going to work then?
Oh, he tested them on his mom. That's how he knew that they would work. After they put up the bubble, but before most of the plan had been enacted, he made sure that Juliet gave her the sleeping drug, and if it worked and she disappeared from the bubble, then he knew that it would work on them. And that's why when Juliet was mesmerized by Holly, Juliet specifically said, there was somebody else, but she's not here anymore. And, this kind of leads into, one of the elements of this book that I thought was kind of one of the telling aspects of it being for kids is the foreshadowing was not subtle in this book and at all, because there's a point where Colfer actually says something along the lines of Holly dismissed this thinking not important, but she wished she had, but she probably should have asked about it. because, had she would have known that they had tested and like actually knew how to get out of there,
Yeah.
And Viastrate makes a good point. Foley could have definitely effed up the plan by speaking up, and especially with that little bit of information, Yeah, it could have been a whole different ending.
I definitely missed that. I thought by testing it he meant like he just drugged his mom and saw that she like fell asleep. I didn't know that she like disappeared. So that makes sense. I totally missed that.
Yeah, it's a definite. It's not something I remember even reading the first time or even second time through, because I'm pretty sure this was somewhere around the fourth or fifth time that I've read this book. So it's very easy to miss, and I kind of like that there were some subtleties thrown in there. Could have used maybe a little bit more, but again, this is for kids, not for adults, and maybe that's the parts that are missing. But I think having the little bits like that we can pick out even as adults that kids might not, makes it fun to read as an adult as well. And and it was really nice to go back and find these little things that I'd never read before, even in my third, fourth reading. And this is not a long book, but
yeah,
I probably read it before, but maybe I didn't understand the significance. So, it's a fun reread too, which is, hard to find is in books that are simple.
That's definitely true. What did you think of Mulch Diggums?
Man, that felt like a much needed comedy to relief beyond Foley's general snarkiness towards Commander Root. Like, I thought he was a pretty good foil to most of the other fairy characters, which was kind of needed to show that like there is another element to these people aside from Holly's slightly higher levels of empathy. It shows. I thought it was really cool, the interpretation of dwarves, though. Like, I never would have thought about that, and I think that's actually one of my favorite parts of this book as a whole, was seeing what fairy folk actually were according to Colfer. Like, dwarves don't just mine; they literally eat dirt and shit bricks. Like, it was so cool to get
at high speed,
super high speed. And it was so cool to like see how things that were very real could turn into legend, and how we humanized these supposedly real life beings by giving them more human characteristics, when in reality they're more just different species than we give them credit for. Like, and it's not even magic that does it. That's just biology. Saliva made to break down dirt and heal burns. That the fact that dwarves can't burp, they can only fart. It was really cool to get that kind of like insight into like anatomy of a fairy folk, and especially ones that weren't just like elves that are a bit short with pointy ears and they like to fly and they have these little nubs and they're not sure if they were descended from pterodactyls or humans or whatever shared ancestor, but like, it was something more, and it felt like a good intersection of science and magic, and it was really fun to read.
Yeah, I definitely like Mulch. He's the opposite but the same as Artemis, right? He's in it for the gold, but he doesn't have a plan. His idea of careful planning is to figure it out in the moment, where Artemis is like, I already know what I'm going to do for the next 6 months, so let's go. And um, it's really cool that Mulch turns away his magic in order to become a burglar and go into people's houses uninvited.
Mhm.
Where I can't imagine Artemis doing that. Like if somebody said, Artemis, do you want fairy magic? I can't see him being like, no, it's really inconvenient when I want to go in people's homes. You know, I can't see him doing that. So I really liked the contrast between Artemis and Mulch in that sense.
Well, I mean, it definitely helps that Mulch has like all of these like innate abilities without magic that Artemis doesn't necessarily. Plus, Artemis is the type of character who getting a power like that he would immediately be thinking about the advantages it would give him as opposed to like the restrictions, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you're right. He is not only a foil to Root, like it is being mentioned in chat, but he's a foil to Artemis as well. And I very much agree with VS Drake. The amount of world building that Colfer was able to do with that one character in 300 pages is amazing, and even as a whole, not just with Mulch Diggums, but there's a bit with the trolls as well, like the fact that there's these great giant beasts that occasionally get shot to the surface because they wander into a hole they're not supposed to. You know, goblins having fire and being the ultimate enemies of dwarves because dwarves hate fire. Go figure. You know, it was really cool to see these dynamics play off of each other, and you can absolutely tell that he's building for something bigger, like that there's going to be more, and it makes you want to read more too, because you're like, oh, this is a cool adventure, but I want to know more about that world too, you know.
I think that's definitely what keeps you reading the Artemis Fowl books is getting more of the lore, more of the world building.
Yeah.
And K Brock, I have no idea if the anatomy was Colfer's alone or if he took that off of somebody else.
I don't know. I've done a fair amount of like just reading on mythology and stuff, not just Greek, as we've discussed in lore, funny enough. But I remember researching a bit of this stuff as much as I could back in the days before Google was the all-knowing, all-seeing search engine that it is today. And I don't remember seeing anything like that. He might have pulled like some ideas, but there's definitely just like his creativity made it in there for sure, like in a big way. I don't remember ever seeing anything, especially again with the dwarves, the trolls. You know, there's trolls come from Norwegian-ish backgrounds as well as Celtic, and there's various ideas about what they look like and things like that. So there's a lot more to play with there. But dwarves, generally have a fairly, a fairly rigid idea of what they are, and there's not a huge amount of working around that. VS Drake, very very much right. Dwarves are the classic pickaxe imagery, maybe a shield and a hammer.
Yeah.
Like you don't typically think of them as wearing onesies with a bum flap so that they can eat dirt and tunnel through the earth via their mouths. Like that is very much uniquely him. And I appreciated the amount that went into that. Like it makes it so much fun, like even as an adult, like imagining these things. And I also really enjoyed his sense of humor in this book. I mean, it's fairly simple so that kids can get into it too, but like I thought it was pretty well done. Especially, it gets me every time, but the image of Foley, a full-grown centaur genius with a tinfoil hat on, or a foil hat on. Like, I don't know what it is about that, but it gets me every time, especially just imagining him like surrounded by this like insanely advanced technology, being one of the smartest creatures on the planet Earth, and tinfoil hat.
Yeah. Yeah, that Foley is he's a character. I
But
honestly I want to be Foley because he's so cool and he gets so many gadgets to play with and he's so paranoid. And
yeah, he's
it's
like
like
a Q from the Bond films and books, except he's, like you said, paranoid and mythical.
I could never be Artemis because I mean, one, kidnapping is so not my style, but I don't react well under pressure and things, but I would love to be Foley, the man in the booth.
No, that'd be fun, especially given what you get to come up with and the leverage you have over your superiors because no one can do what you do. But I really like this question from VS Drake. Was there a weak character that you were not interested in reading about? Apparently, VS Drake is leaving us hanging out to dry because they like them all. But
Yeah, I mean there was a lot of good characters with that didn't seem too flat. Uh hmm. If you've got an answer, go ahead and jump in while I'm thinking here. But
I don't think there was any character that I overtly didn't enjoy. Um, I think probably the one that I would be least attached to in any way is somewhere a tie between Juliet and Artemis's mom. I mean, I probably Juliet then, just because even with Artemis's mom, the element of what seemed like dementia in there, something I can empathize with because that's happened to people in my family, and I can understand the kind of conflict with taking care of somebody in that situation. Like, how do you do that? And how would you even do that as a 12-year-old, let alone an adult? So yeah, Juliet is probably my least favorite, and even then, like, it's probably because she's just there's not a lot of delving into her. She is smart, manipulative, and interesting wrestling. Obviously she's a butler, so she can probably kick ass too, but
say no.
I don't believe my mother has dementia. Hey, Brock, thank you for asking.
For me it's Juliet, but I've in the last 2 weeks I've read the first 5 books in the series, so I have some more perspective on Juliet from the other books. So she does get rounded out a little better in the next few books.
Yeah,
But
and
it's hard to say I don't like her because I know where she goes,
well, yeah, and that's the thing is, like, I've read all but I think like the 2 most recent books, so I do know that she does become a much more well-rounded character, and I actually end up liking her as a character. It's just in the context of this book, aside from like, I think there's a couple very sexist fairy leprechaun members who can probably go stuff it. I don't even remember their names, but but like, as far as like even the secondary characters, like, those wouldn't even reach that level. And I was trying to think within those. Oh yeah, Trouble, that's the one. That
Trouble.
guy. Yeah, it's not spelled that way, I don't think, but it might be. I did the audiobook this time around. It's been a while since I've read the actual book, but there was a commander who basically was like, I don't know what you're doing trying to save the only female leprechaun officer, blah, blah, blah. And he was super trigger happy, and yeah, that guy can stuff it. So that'd probably be my actual least likely. Oh, Stormreed, the troll. Yeah, that's I'm curious though if you could elaborate, Stormreed, about what you didn't like about the troll. Is it just the destructive nature, or is it the was there something like you didn't like about how it was written? I mean, for me, like it's hard to hate something that's basically just like a moderately brainless beast that's just entirely reactionary in the way that it interacts with the world. Like you don't have to like it, but like it's fairly like one-dimensional or two-dimensional at best in its thinking. You know,
Yeah.
it's like me hurt, make other hurt.
Yeah.
Like that's all there is to it.
Yeah, I don't think Commander Root liked the trouble character. I think he was pretty bad. But I mean the troll was, yeah, I guess what's the motive behind the troll to destroy things? That's, I kind of view that as more like if a bear got in a camp, what would it do? It would probably,
And it was poked with fire.
yeah, it would probably trash the place looking for food, and then when people went, "Hey, knock it off," it would probably be like, "I don't know what you're saying. Take my paw."
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. We obviously don't get a big look at trolls in this book.
Hint, hint, wink, wink. For those of you who want to continue.
I think the troll just existed to introduce us to the fairy world.
Well, and I think it was to force a. Yeah, it was basically what's a MacGuffin, more or less, like a living MacGuffin.
Yeah.
To move the plot along. But I totally understand some people don't like the destructive nature of things, and that's a totally viable reason to dislike a character. But also, yeah, again, the commander that took over for Root, that guy again can go stuff it.
Yeah, he was a very typical pain in the ass character, especially in the next couple books. He's
Quit getting ahead of yourself, Adam.
Obviously we don't get a lot of behind the scenes motives for him, but he filled his role well, which was to be a dick who took over and did his own thing.
This is true. And again, it's there, like I don't think, and I think that is a strength of this book, is that there's no truly like weak characters that are meant to have any impact on the book at all. So it's nice that you can like all the characters, and that the fact that Colfer is able to create that sense of liking all the characters, even the villain, anti-villain, anti-hero, wherever we landed on it for Artemis Fowl, that he was able to make all of them like likable or fit a good role within this book shows how strong of a storyteller he is. I don't know how well he would do with an adult book, but his ability to tell stories in a way that are digestible for kids and adults is, I would say, excellent.
Me too. He didn't feel the need to get too nitty-gritty and serious to describe the world that he wanted to paint for us, but it still felt like it was very well fleshed out. So he did a really good job.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, and Viz Drake mentioned, I almost forgot that Colfer actually did an additional story in the Hitchhiker's Guide book universe. And not to get too much into that, but he does a fairly good job of writing. Again, I think it's a little bit different when you're trying to add on to somebody else's story as opposed to writing your own. And I think that's where Colfer really shines, is writing his own. But he does do a good job of filling Douglas Adams' shoes. But maybe that's for another episode. If you join us as patrons, you can just potentially help decide that.
Yes, maybe we'll get a suggestion for Hitchhiker's Guide or some other book. And...
Plug. Well, we have it there as a suggestion. Thank you, V.S. Drake. We may have to get through the entirety of that series, though, to get to that last book. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. But we'll figure that out at some point.
To Storm's question, I'm assuming you're talking about Foley, the centaur. They kind of go into it a little bit. The centaurs are one of the fairy families, but they've mostly died out. There's only a few of them left at this point in the timeline. So he's just another fairy folk that lives beneath the earth.
Yeah, and and specifically, there is a struggle to it, obviously, or they wouldn't almost have died out.
Yeah.
They are clearly not built for it, except weird ones like Foley.
Yeah. And in future books, they talk about how Foley goes for runs every day because he's half horse, right? So he's got to go for runs.
Well, and the other thing we have to keep in mind is that just because most of the fairy folk are small does not mean that the areas in which they live are necessarily tiny either. Because the trolls are huge and they make their way around. So obviously there is room around for something that's centaur sized. It's just Foley is probably going to be massive compared to others, or maybe he's half humanoid, half pony instead of horse. Who knows? I know they actually get into this a little bit down the road, but I'm trying to keep it within the confines of Artemis Fowl, the first book.
With that, we are kind of running towards the end of the show tonight. I'd say we have enough time for one more topic, or maybe just end thoughts topic.
Well, why don't we do final impressions, unless we get something from the chat specifically, which we can come back on. But for our final impressions, why don't you start us off there, Adam, unless you need me to while you're putting that up in the chat.
No, that's all right. I really liked the book. I thought it was a really smooth, intriguing, suck you in novel. There wasn't much. There weren't a lot of parts in the book that I was like, "Oh, this is boring. Gonna move on." But obviously, it was a very short book, so there's not a lot of room for that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I would definitely recommend this, even to adults. Yeah, I think that about covers it. I enjoyed it. It was short. Read it.
I'm mostly on the same wavelength with you there. I really like this book. I not only will continue to recommend it, but I have recommended it a number of times to people. It's great, and it's a fun series that if you don't have a lot of time to read, but if you like good world building, good storytelling, but you want something kind of very easy to read on your own, or honestly, ideally, if you have a kid in your life that you can share this with, this is an excellent book to do that with. I would say as long as they, understand, the basics of how a story works, like even the simplest elements of it, they can probably get a lot out of this book, even at like the youngest, younger ages, or it's something to bond over if, you have older children and younger siblings, nieces and nephews, things like that. It's a fun book to read, and if they can't read and know stories, then you can do the audiobook. So yeah. I can't, personally, it's one of my all-time favorite series growing up, and it continues to resonate with me, and I'm glad that it continues to do so. So it was really fun to go back and, feel that again, and especially to not be disappointed.
Yeah, I definitely wish I remembered it better from the first read. All I really remember is thinking, oh yeah, we should definitely read Artemis Fowl. I remember I loved that when I was a kid, but that's it. So yeah, it sounds like the chat really liked it too. VS Drake said his 4-year-old son listened to it and he loved it, so that's really cool. that even a 4-year-old was like, oh, this is a cool story. Storm with the different characters and their abilities. That's a good one. It's such a diverse world building in this one. It's really cool.
And you're welcome, VS Drake, and thank you very much. We'll thank you again towards the end. I don't want to make it seem like we're going to sign off because we do need to get into our signing off stuff here. But we're happy to be presenting to you guys. This is a privilege for us to be able to do as well. We get to read, we get to hang out with each other, and a really fun, supportive community, and we hope to keep building on that.
Yeah. Just on that note, too, the thing we love the most about this show is the exposure we get for books that we would have never read, like Truly Devious, or our next one that we're going to be reading are 2 books that I never would have ever thought of reading. So, yeah. With that, though, let's talk about the book vote that just ended 20 minutes ago. And as well as our next up book. So our next up book is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. That's for May 8th. So get reading. You've got 2 weeks. And then the result of our vote tonight, drum roll please. The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. Read by May 22nd. That is a personal favorite of mine. So I cannot wait to reread it. I will definitely be rereading it. I won't just go based off of my previous reads. It's great.
Well, this will be a first for me, so I am looking forward to it. I have heard good things. Time to see for myself. So if you're new to it like me or rereading like with Adam, everybody's welcome. Please feel free to invite others in on this. Especially if they like, the high fantasies of Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah. With that, let me just give you guys some quick plugs. DMstable.com is the place you want to go for all things DM's Table. We've got all of our information on there about everything we do. The 800's, our podcast, Roll with Advantage. So check out dmstable.com for all information DM's Table wise. We also have a YouTube channel. You can find the link under the video. That's just youtube.com. Never mind, I don't know the link. It's DM's Table on YouTube. We also have a Patreon that we talked about. It's how you get to tell us what to read every week. The link is below the video. Check it out. It's just DM's Table on Patreon. The cheapest option is just $2, and that gets you the ability to tell us what to do. And that's something we look forward to because obviously if it's just Alex and I picking books, we're going to do a lot of the books that we like, and we won't spread out. So go over there and tell us what to do. We also have Facebook and Twitter. If you want to check us out on our socials, that's at the DM's Table on Facebook and at DM's Table for Twitter. And finally, we have Discord. We chat all things nerdy on Discord, including books. If you want to join us on Discord, hit us up on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll get you a link for our private Discord channel. It's pretty dope. Just trust me.
All right. And coming up, we just closed out our voting for May, which is that was our last book for the Anyone Can Vote month. So if you liked being able to tell us what to do, again, consider tossing a couple dollars our way. And there are other perks on there. And the more interactive we get on there, the more perks we'll probably be adding on to the different patron levels. And if you have suggestions for things, feel free to toss those our way as well. And May is also going to be our Mental Health Awareness Month. Again, we'll be promoting specifically Jasper's Game Day. They are a organization that promotes mental health resources, in particular surrounding depression and suicide and self-harm and anxiety and things like that. And they have created a community that looks to bring awareness and resources and a fun community to those who have suffered through it or know people who have. So feel free to check them out at jaspersgameday.com or Jasper's Game Day on Twitter. And they also have a Discord on there. And I've had some fun reading through some of the stuff that they have. They have lots of stuff going on. We'll have more details in May. And coming up in June, we also will have our Asian and Pacific Islander Authors Month. If you have any books by Asian or Pacific Island authors, please feel free to send your suggestions our way. We'll take suggestions through tomorrow, and by Monday we will have our new vote posted.
So yeah, hit us up with those suggestions, especially Storm. If you've got any old people books you have in mind, hit us up. Even if they're not Asian or Pacific Island book or author books, we can always add them to the list for future votes as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. If you have any other suggestions, please don't hesitate to send them our way. We love having suggestions to pull from, again, in particular, that we don't necessarily choose because it gets us out of our own wheelhouses or our own comfort zones. So,
definitely.
All right. And unless you have something for us, Adam, I think that brings us to the end of another wonderful episode of the 800s. Thank you, everybody, for participating. This has been a great episode. It's a lot of fun. We love having an active chat, and it sounds like you guys had a lot of fun reading along with us. We hope to continue that. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, and hopefully for future nights as well.
Yep. See you next book.
Oh, wait, I've already read this book.